Welcome back to Good Revenue. Today we're joined by Paula Courtney. She is a customer success expert with a wide range of experience across industries. Welcome, Paula.
Thank you. Nice to be on your podcast.
You've worked in industries ranging from manufacturing to aerospace, retail, telecom. One of your quotes is, "Not all customer experiences matter." And I think that's a really helpful insight. Will you tell us more about that?
Well, one of the things that we focus on a lot is the friction that customers experience in every business. And I can tell you with confidence that no matter what the organization, no matter what industry, whether it's B2B or B2C, a good portion of your customers on a regular basis are experiencing friction with you. So for retail, for example, that percentage is 40% in the last 6 months. Sometimes in telecom, that number could be as high as 90%. Customers can experience friction when they're reviewing your marketing materials, when maybe they're perusing your website or using your app or browsing your stores if you're a retailer. Things like long lineups, messy displays, difficult to navigate through mobile apps. So lots of different friction. And given that friction is almost designed by organizations, right? We purposefully design, complicated IVR systems where you're in voicemail jail trying to get through to a live human. The question and the finding is that all of that friction, it's not all created equal. There are certain experiences that matter most. And by matter, we mean that they drive and connect to market behavior that drives profitable growth, that drives revenue, that connects to revenue. So that's what we mean by not all experiences are created equal. Not all friction has the same effect on your bottom line.
How do you go about determining which negative experiences matter, and how do you sort those from the ones that don't?
You need to talk to your customers. And this is the one area where you can't use secondary data sources to find out what customers are really experiencing. I was speaking to one of my ag clients who said that they're investing a lot in synthetic research. And that is research that really mimics, that you could draw insights from, let's say, AI that mimics your customer's behavior. So you train your model and then you query your fake customers and get insights. And so far, that synthetic research has proven to be very valuable, that they're able to, on a test and control, they're able to get an 80% match. This is what he shared with me in terms of how the AI model produced those insights versus their real customer data. Now, when it comes to customer experience, though, even this client admitted that you still have to talk to the customer. We can never mimic or artificially train a model to find out what happened to a customer on a particular day. They had to have experienced that problem. So the best way to measure friction is by talking to your customers and really talking to them. So you could talk to them by having conversations with them, whether it's your sales reps. You can talk to them by interrogating them through formal means, such as surveys, which are still very much widely used. You can use focus groups or other kinds of methods, but speaking to customers and asking them deliberately, have they had problems and what kinds of problems they've experienced is one of the ways that you can collect that inventory of problems. And then you use statistical analysis to decipher which ones really connect to those market behaviors that drive revenue for your organization.
Yeah, I love this. We're big advocates for insights over here. Customer success and customer experience has really evolved over the decades, and you have a lot of experience in some of those trends and patterns. Are there any takeaways that are emerging that you think are helpful for people?
One of the biggest influences of how customer experience has been shaped is through the onset of technology, specifically omni-channel choices for clients. So customers want to do business the way they want to do business. If you are the customer type that prefers an in-person interaction to buy, then you as an organization should provide that. Now, if you want to nudge a customer to a lower cost channel, then make sure that transition to low cost channels is seamless for customers. And the most important thing that we're seeing, which is both problematic and an opportunity, is regardless of the channel that you offer customers, you have to ensure that your signature, your brand is represented in the same way across all of those channels, whether it's a call center interaction, a web interface interaction, an in-person interaction, a mobile interaction. Do you show up in the same way? And is the experience similar? Do you have that same signature and personality in all of those channels? And do you give customers choices as you nudge them through lower cost channels or as you nudge them through channels that they can self-serve, or do you force them? So when you force a customer through a channel, you create friction that might affect you later on down the line. So understanding that not all experiences are created equal and not all channels present in the same way, but your customers have very different needs, and recognizing that there is a difference in your customer base. Your customers are not a homogeneous group. They really are a heterogeneous group of what I call a cast of characters, and understanding how they segment and how you offer service to your segments is really important.
I love that. I'm a big advocate for segmentation and segments over here, so I love hearing that. You've identified 3 key predictors of customer behavior. Can you break those down for us and explain how they apply in your work?
So there's a lot of social science that our work is based on, human motivation theory. And one of them says that there are certain conditions under which a customer's experience will predict their behavior. The 3 conditions are as follows. One is a personal versus a borrowed experience. So what that means is you could experience a product or a company by reading the reviews about them. And they get bad reviews, so you're not going to go to that hotel or that restaurant. So that's what we call an indirect or a borrowed experience. You didn't have it firsthand, but you're borrowing someone else's experience to form your opinion and subsequent behavior. So that is one way that your experience, borrowed, can predict your behavior. But a personal experience is the most powerful predictor of behavior. So not just reading about someone else's experience, but you having it firsthand is far more predictive of how you will behave than simply reading a review. The second sort of predictor is that we are creatures of habit. So the stuff that we've done in the past and how we've behaved in the past when presented with certain stimuli, that's just going to predict how we're going to behave in the future. So if you're an organization and you want to see a fundamental change in your customers' behavior, change the stimuli. Make it look so different that it's not recognizable to them, because otherwise it's just going to do the thing that they've been doing all along. And the third most powerful predictor of customer behavior is negative experiences. And this gets back to the flight and fight response that is in our genetic code. And when we are presented with problems or something that's awful or terrible, we do one of 2 things. Commercially, we run away, we stop doing business with that company, or we fight. We contact the company, we try to get resolution, etc. So the flight-fight response experience is bad for business, and it is incredibly predictive of non-market behavior.
Are you seeing any patterns when it comes to how some of these experiences break down across industry or sectors, anything like that?
Yes. So one of the biggest patterns is if you are in a high-touch business, so in other words, there's a lot of transactions, there are many moments of truth, many opportunities for customers to interact with your business, maybe you're a retail, high-frequency retail as an example, then the likelihood of your customers experiencing a high volume of problems is really great. If you're in a low volume, low transaction business like life insurance, where you're just getting a premium renewal notice on an annual basis, you have likely very low incidence of friction because you're not interacting. If you do try to get high frequency interaction because you want engagement with your brand, you do run the risk of creating more opportunities for things to go sideways. So generically, that would be the big finding, that high touch businesses will see high volume of friction, and low touch will see low friction, low volumes. It doesn't mean that the friction is more devastating for those high volume or high transaction businesses at all. It doesn't mean that at all, because remember, there's a huge number of problems that really don't affect or influence how and what customers do at the end of the day.
When it comes to these indirect customer experiences, I think that's a really powerful insight as well. How do you see word of mouth playing into that?
Fantastic. Wharton did a study, and we did a study with them as well, on the impact of negative word of mouth. There is no question that there are two types of word of mouth. There is what we call the amplified word of mouth, which are these generic reviews where lots of people are talking. You don't know who those people are. So you have less trust in what, that experience is when you're reading reviews, as an example. So that is what we call amplified word of mouth, which is non-personal. Then there's the personal word of mouth. This is the person you know and trust, a family member, a colleague, a business partner. When they give you an experience and share their story with you, there is a 50% probability that you are going to act on that. So if you hear a negative story from a personal friend, associate, or relative, there is a 1 in 2 chance that you will not do business with that company if it's a negative word of mouth. But that percentage is very different if it's negative word of mouth from a review. You may or may not be influenced. Again, it's because you don't have a personal connection with the person who is giving that review. You don't know who they are, right? And plus, with deep fakes, there are so many fake reviews and posts that we see all the time. So negative word of mouth is incredibly powerful, but the one that you need to worry about is the one that's shared amongst your circle.
That makes a lot of sense. I've noticed on consumer sites a trend towards aggregating reviews. For example, TripAdvisor, and they do give you more of a consensus view. Are you seeing any impact from that kind of word of mouth feedback?
Not really. At the end of the day, I think that what I would recommend a business, which is no different than I would give this recommendation to a consumer, is have multiple inputs before you take a decision. Don't rely on one single source of information to drive what you're going to do, what your market behavior is going to be. So a review, however it's presented to you, whether an aggregate format or not, it's one source, it's one data source, but you might want to take a look at other things, the price, the hotel. What I would give consumers advice is go to the Instagram page of the site, see what people are posting as photos from that particular experience. It connects you a little bit more with the person giving the review. So again, don't rely on single source data points to form a decision. Rely on multiple sort of data insights to take a decision as to whether this is a good business or whether you should spend your money on this hotel or not.
Let's pivot a little bit and talk about a couple of the case studies. I know you've done so much work, so there are a lot of different case studies we could dig into. Can you take us through the story you were telling me about the hand soap company? Because I thought this was fascinating. It's a great example of where they were losing business even though they were getting great feedback. Will you tell us about that?
Yeah, so this is a typical finding where companies employ what I call applause meter surveys. How much do you love us on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 to 5, 1 to whatever, it doesn't matter, scalar metrics, to really assess the attitudes of their customers. And the hope and prayer there is that the more positive the sentiment, the more likely customers are going to buy from you. They're going to increase trip frequency, volume size, whatever that business is. And in this instance, a client came to us, or a company came to us and said, listen, we're losing money. We have lost revenue in many of our sites. They were business services organizations. So basically they supplied shop towels, hand soap, sanitizers to small businesses like restaurants, small commercial organizations. So anything that a business relies on, a restaurant or small business, for their cleaning supplies. And that's what they did. And including uniforms. They were the supplier of uniform rentals. So the sales rep or sales associate for this business would drive a truck, go to all their locations, pick up the dirty uniforms, replace with new ones, replace the hand sanitizer. That was their business. And they were losing money. So customers weren't renewing and they needed to figure out why. And when we approached their president and said, we need to talk to your customers and do a survey, and said, no, don't do a survey because I know our customers love us. A survey is just going to tell me what I already know. Our customers love us, but we're still losing money. Why is that? That disconnect is more apparent and more prevalent. And the reason is that you're not measuring the right things, number one. And number two, you're not really connecting what you're measuring with that market behavior, which is really critical. In this organization, one of the reasons why it was so powerful is we went out and surveyed in a very non-traditional way, interrogating on problem experience. And one of the sacred cows of this business was, hey, our business is made or lost because of our sales associates are a sole person that interact with those customers. So if they do a bad job, we're losing customers. And they were completely wrong. So the way customers viewed the sales associate, they were an important part, but they really were stuck on the contracts, the renewal terms that the organization set out. They wanted 5-year contracts. And so when we uncovered that one finding, literally the CEO, during the presentation of the findings, when we found that was the biggest revenue at risk area of friction, he's calling his legal and he says, change the contract terms immediately, like to 1 year, forget the 5-year, lose them all. They discovered a lot of other things that they needed to do differently. But as a result of that very granular, actionable insight that was linked to customer behavior, they were able to basically eliminate all their lost business. They had 0 locations with a lost business ratio after they implemented these findings. And I remember the CEO coming to me afterwards. He says, you should have priced your project on a contingency. You would have made a lot more money. That business did so well that eventually they got purchased by a very large multinational that purchased them, and president retired. So it was a very successful engagement, and it really challenged a lot of the beliefs that leadership team held near and dear to their hearts, because we measured different things and we measured things that made them a little uncomfortable.
This is such a great story, and it really reminds me of that old adage, what gets measured gets done. But the question is what to measure. NPS and CSAT get a lot of attention, and I think maybe outsized attention relative to what they deserve. I think you agree with me. What are the metrics that you think matter?
So we have a belief that NPS is insufficient to help steer an organization and know where to look for pain and problems. And one of the reasons is, imagine going to a doctor and the doctor has to assess your health, but you tell the doctor you can only pick one of the metrics, whether it's my weight, my blood pressure, my heart rate, pick one, and then tell me whether I'm healthy or not. Think about your customers as the patient, and think about the hundreds, literally hundreds of touch points that customers have with the business and the complexity in that relationship. How could you possibly gauge the overall health of a customer-supplier relationship with a single question? On a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend? What we're seeing a movement is away from single metrics as the barometer for organizational customer success. And what we've created is more of an index model that is comprised of 3 things. One is the absence or presence of friction. Friction, we know, in social science, it is 100% geared to loss of business. And we continue to prove that time and time again. The second is recovery. So it's one thing to create problems for customers, but if you do a phenomenal job of recovering from that friction, then that can almost mitigate all the damage associated with that problem in the first place. So problem recovery is equally, if not more important, than friction's going to happen. But can you recover from it to a customer's complete satisfaction? Can you put them in the same place that they were before they had the problem? So that's the second component. And then the third is, and this was the dark horse that we discovered, is engagement. How engaged are your customers with your brand when they're not buying from you? Do they visit your website because they're interested in seeing what you have to say about whatever it is? Are you a thought leader in building widgets? Like whatever that business model is, whether you're a retailer, a manufacturer, an aerospace company, do customers engage with you? Do they follow you on social? Do they download any of the apps that you have to do things like financial literacy or whatever that app is? Do they opt into marketing campaigns? So things that are not about buying from you, are they engaged? Engagement is incredibly important and it should be measured. So when those 3 things happen in concert or in some combination, we can predict year-over-year revenue growth.
Super helpful. Have you read the book by Bob Sutton about, I think it's called Good Friction, Bad Friction?
I haven't.
I loved this. I heard him speak. He's a professor at Stanford, I believe. I think you would really like it. It really speaks to what you're talking about as well, this breakdown between the good and bad friction, because I agree with you that most of it tends to be bad. But he had some interesting examples of the flip side of it. Have you seen any sort of patterns around the types of friction that are particularly complicated or challenging for customers?
Relationship friction. So we consider friction to be more than what many companies might consider. So friction is not just, oh my God, the statement was inaccurate, or it took too long to get through, or your prices are too high, or your sales associates are rude, or your stores are messy. It could also be things like you don't recognize and reward me for my tenure or my business with you, or I don't feel valued and appreciated as a customer. So some of those, what we call outer ring areas of your business, need to be studied. So we consider the three areas of friction. So there is your core product or service. So whatever you're in business for, whether if you're a mobile service provider, extent of coverage and quality of signal. And then you have your inner ring, your sort of outer ring, the second ring, which is what we call the peripherals. Those are the business processes that you as a company rely on to bring your core product in and service to market. Your customer support, your marketing, your after-sales support, your website, the tools that you need to bring that core product to market. So lots of friction in that center ring. And then the outer ring is the relationship issues. And speaking and continuing with the mobile phone company, a lot of customers still get annoyed when new customers get better offers than existing customers. I always say, like, why does a new customer off the street getting a free iPad when they sign on, and where's my free iPad? I've been with you for 10 years. So those are the sort of relationship experiences that are really important, and they're more difficult to manage because you have no permission to fix that outer ring unless you nail your core and your peripheral friction areas first. You know, sometimes companies say, let's just make people feel valued, but we'll still deliver a crappy service. And it doesn't work that way. It really is, there's a hierarchy. You got to fix the inner and then that peripheral, the business processes that bring that product to market. And then you can focus on those relationship issues.
I think that hierarchy and that sense of a journey there is really helpful. I think that's a really great takeaway. You look at customer experience broadly when it comes to organizations that you're working with. One of the things that seems to fall increasingly on customer success teams in particular is the revenue responsibility around renewals and cross-sells and upsells. And obviously there's no single way to do this. In some companies, the sales team owns that. And in other companies, I've seen that responsibility sitting with customer success or being split between the two. Given that there is a lot of variance, how do you think about these long-term revenue goals and this question of long-term customer value? Do you have any recommendations for companies based on your experiences?
So I feel that companies that have departments that are focused on renewals or cross-sell, they cannot and should not be disconnected from the part of the organization that is operationalizing and delivering a customer experience. The two are inextricably linked. And you could create what we call the illusion of progress, which is getting in a customer through rebates and offers and whatever you need to grow that sales, that renewal rate. But it really is a false economy because think of that hamster in a wheel. I've had clients, not a word of a lie, where their customer acquisition rate is the exact same as their defection rate.
Yeah.
The customers are coming in and they're leaving at the same speed, which is awful and it's expensive and it's crazy. And the way to fix that is by not separating those two functions, by understanding what kinds of experiences do link to renewals, what kinds of experiences do lead to customers wanting to buy more, increase their spend. And when you have financial risk due to bad experiences in your business, your ability to cross-sell and upsell is very difficult. It's non-existent. It's really hard. So again, illusion of progress is something that we see all the time. And the best way to fix it is connecting those two functions and having metrics that really inform the leadership team with, hey, these things create non-renewal, and we have a lot of them, so let's fix them.
One of the things that I've observed in my own work around monetization and revenue is that there's a real difference between the companies that tend to be more short-term focused. So they're just focused on these isolated metrics or just our annual goals, et cetera, versus the ones that are really thinking longer term about, Paula is my customer. What do I need to do to keep her over time, make her a lifetime customer, whatever those goals are. Do you see evidence of that in your data as well?
Yes. And where I start to see and observe organizations that do one versus the other is really the industry and where they are on their stage of development. A mature organization, for example, in financial services, really studies customers as a life stage. They look at, hey, when they're in college, then they're going to graduate, they're going to have their first home with their first car. This is what their needs are going to be. So they're looking at the long-term vision of that customer. When I see companies that are more startup, they're in high growth, high acquisition. They're not thinking about the customer long term. They're just thinking about getting products pushed out. We tend not to work with those types of companies because our focus is really the retention of customers. Companies that are interested in not just protecting their growth, but protecting the customers that they have. So growing and protecting is the only type of company that I'm interested in working with. If they're only interested in growing, they don't care about customer experience. They don't care about anything other than just selling and pushing product. And that's okay too. It depends on where they are on their journey as an organization.
Do you think they would be better off if they thought about this sooner? Because it seems to me like they would. What do you think?
I just had a conversation with the CEO who used to be at a diagnostic medical imaging company, and he joined a startup. And I spoke to him and I said, hey, how's it going? Have you thought about the customer experience? He goes, are you kidding, Paula? I'm just focused on getting products out the door. We're in high growth. We need to. So they have like proof points they need to deliver. They've got responsibilities. I think there is a natural, when you should care about it, moment for those kind of startups or early stage organizations. So I think it's okay to be in high growth and not necessarily worry about engineering an experience that you're still learning from. So I've never seen a mature organization just be growth focused.
You have worked with some really large clients. I know that you've worked, for example, with a global bank. Will you tell us a little bit about one of the stories where the CMO said that was actually the best project he'd worked on? What was it that made that project so impactful?
This was a company that hired us after they had just lost a class action lawsuit for predatory lending practices. So you can imagine.
Not great. Yeah.
Not great for them. They were at the bottom of the barrel. And what we produced for them was insights that were highly granular, very actionable, and again, linked to financial outcomes. It allowed this organization that had 1,000 things to fix because they were in deep financial trouble to really hone in with their limited resources and honing on 3 or 4 critical experiences that they needed to nail. And they did. And in 2 years, 24 months, they were able to double their net income. So all of their customer sentiment metrics were moving in the absolute right direction. So they focused on the right things and they got to see the results. And you know what? It's not, listen, we always say you need 3 things to have that kind of transformation, that kind of like amazing turnaround. And the 3 things are this. You need a burning platform. Companies that are in high growth, they're making money in their sleep, usually they don't have the impetus to do different. So having a burning platform, and this company had it. They had lost a lawsuit. They were in financial trouble. Reputationally, they were at the bottom of the sea. So you need a burning platform. And then the second thing you need is you absolutely need great customer insights, great customer data that tells you where to look, where to invest. And that's highly actionable, right? Not just data that sits on a top shelf, but data that you could do something with. But the third most important thing that you need is you need amazing leader. You need a phenomenal leadership team that has the courage to learn the courage to be okay with failure and to try something new and different. And you need those three things. I call it the perfect storm. The perfect storm has to have those three ingredients in order for true and real transformation to occur. Our best case studies come from me sharing stories that had those three things in play.
How is AI and the rise of automation generally affecting your work?
So there's so many different ways that I can answer this question. We don't get involved in advising our clients on how to implement AI, but we do provide some cautionary advice for organizations, and that is don't forget to humanize your interactions with your customers. We find smaller organizations are far more adept at using AI to their benefit to personalize customer experiences than larger ones. Large organizations tend to be stuck in privacy issues and lack of a roadmap. So I'd say, like any change management initiative, which AI is, whether you're doing a digital transformation, an omni-channel transformation using AI or not, it's the same. You need a clear strategy. You need a North Star. And you need to understand how the customer might benefit from this and what are the risks in the customer experience in your implementation roadmap. So that would be what we would say as customer experience practitioners and experts, but we really don't get involved in advising on AI initiatives.
Looking ahead, where do you see customer experience heading?
Great question. So I think that there is going to be more and more pressure on connecting customer experience with financial outcomes. I think the days are gone where NPS sits in a vacuum or customer CSAT scores sit in a boardroom, in a board deck with just numbers. I think the ability to connect revenue to what customers experience and doing ROI calculations on CX improvement initiatives, I think the pressure is greater now than it has ever been. Measurement tools are becoming more sophisticated, so it's definitely there. I think that technology will continue to pressure test organizations to provide frictionless experiences. And I think that's going to be a big challenge. I think AI can be scary. And again, like any implementation of technology, it can have problems during the implementation phase. So having a great monitor on your customer experience throughout any implementation, be it AI or tech or digital, is really critical. So that's what I see happening. I see more pressure on the bottom line.
So we'll move into a few just quick lightning round questions. What's the hardest thing that you've had to do professionally, and what did you learn from it?
Hardest thing I've had to do is start my company 22 years ago. It was hard because it was the company that I was working at filed for Chapter 11, and I just went out on my own, and that was the tough thing to do, but it was the greatest thing I've done.
What's something that everyone else takes for granted that you think is inaccurate?
That's a good one. I think time is something that people take for granted. And I think if you function realizing that you don't have time, so I find that organizations, particularly large ones, take too long to get stuff done. And I think having this constant fire in your belly is really important on every initiative. Time is not on your side. AI is scary, and it is completely revolutionizing, transforming how we do business. So what you think you're investing in AI today, literally in 60 days, the technology is already morphed. So time is something people take for granted, and I think you shouldn't. So I think you need to realize that cycle times have shrunk, and you need to figure out how to get stuff done in 1/10 the time that you did before. So that's what I would say.
I get that. So our last question, what do you think that high performance organizations do differently from average performers?
I think the great organizations that are different from the not so great is to stay in student mode versus master mode. There's so many, I work with the titans of industry, like the large organizations that people look up to. And sometimes when you become a master in your space, you become dangerous. So being a student and being a learner is critical. And having a leadership team that is constantly learning and not afraid to say, I don't know how to do that, teach me. So that whole teach me mentality in an organization's DNA, the learning, the student DNA, in my opinion, is what separates greatness from the not so great. The people who think they've got it, they've nailed it, they just want to get a little bit better, those are the ones that actually don't get better.
This has been such a great conversation, Paula. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. I really enjoyed our chat.
Pleasure. Thanks for listening. If you liked what you heard, leave us a review, subscribe to the show, or check out another episode. We appreciate your support.